In today's episode of Governance This Week, we talk about corruption. We'll learn about Operation Car Wash, its parallels with Operation Clean Hands, and how corruption is a truly transnational affair. To help us make sense of political corruption and how it affects people's lives, I've invited SDG Policy Leader Fellow Denisse Rodriguez Olivari to the studio. Denisse is from Peru, and her work at our school focuses on anti-corruption efforts with a transnational dimension. So welcome, Denisse.
Thank you, Roland, for the invitation.
Denisse, yesterday you were on a panel of an SDG talk with the title Corruption Kills. What is political corruption actually, and how does it affect people's lives?
Oh, thank you for the question. Actually, we chose a title, and it's quite obvious, and it has some impact because we wanted to show that corruption not only kills people when, for example, we're talking about corruption infrastructure, but also kill systems, kill legitimacy, kill interpersonal trust. And when we're talking about political corruption, we're talking about people in public office using public office for the private gain. We are talking about like the most obvious cases of corruption. You know, somebody perhaps sitting president, receiving bribes. We're also thinking about a ring of politicians receiving bribes or trading influence in exchange for favors or contracts. Overall, a whole system working in the benefit of a few people.
So we're going to, of course, zoom in a little bit on Latin America. And in recent weeks, Guillermo Lasso, the president of Ecuador, dissolved parliament to avoid impeachment on corruption charges. In April, former Peruvian president Alejandro Toledo returned to Peru from the United States to face charges of money laundering and corruption during his mandate. What are the most important corruption cases in Latin America at the moment?
Well, we have to say the repercussions of the Lava Jato case. This case spanned over 14 countries, 12 Latin American countries and 2 African countries, and involved all the high-profile politicians, former presidents in Latin America and Africa. And in the case, for example, of Alejandro Toledo and Lasso, what we see is the instrumental use of law to escape corruption charges. In the case of Alejandro Toledo, he delayed the extradition from the US for many, many years. As soon as he realized he's going to be involved and this case finally made the headlines, he decided to escape and stay in the US. Whereas Lasso, when facing this impeachment, decided to dissolve Congress. So we see how political corruption does have a lot of impact on the political system and also the instrumental use of law to prevent being prosecuted for them.
We are, of course, talking to each other here in Florence, Italy, where everyone knows the term mani pulite or clean hands, a journalistic name given to the 1990s investigation into large-scale corruption in Italian politics. So what are the parallels between Lava Jato and that situation in Italy? What kind of skill are we talking about?
So we're talking about, I will say, a Latin American mani pulite, in the sense that it's bringing down political systems. Not in every country that Lava Jato has operated, but in a couple of them. So it marks an after and before in politicians' careers and even in the trajectory of many political parties. Also, what we've seen is this large network of business people, politicians, other high officials in every state, local state, national state. So as we see, I think it provides an interesting proof to see how much have we learned from past experiences and other countries as well.
You already mentioned there are several countries involved in this case, and we are here at the School of Transnational Governance after all. So tell us a bit more about the cross-border dimension of corruption. How does this work?
Well, fighting corruption is a troublesome endeavor. We must remember that it takes a lot of resources, time, money to hide assets, to move them across borders. So one thing that is quite important is working towards asset recovery. And for that, cooperation between states and institutions is key. For example, the first largest asset recovery in Peru, stemming from the Alberto Fujimori's case, former president of Peru, currently sentenced for human rights violations and grand corruption, has been recovered. It took decades. So it's not easy, it's not fast, but it can be done if there is enough cooperation put in place. Also, another thing that is key, and it's moving as we speak, is the cooperation between South and South judiciaries. We're talking about Brazilian prosecution collaborating with Peruvian prosecution to exchange information and to build a case, for example, in the Peruvian case, in the Peruvian Lava Jato, with information from the Brazilian Lava Jato. So now and ever, it's more important to remember that this flow of information and collaboration across global South, global North, and between the South and the South is key. Otherwise, we wouldn't know about, for example, amounts of money, the root of money, and also where the money is basically deposited. It's mostly deposited in other countries outside Latin America and outside Africa.
What kind of policies do we need concretely to actually tackle this kind of cross-border corruption, these illegal flows of money? What do we need to do more or better?
Well, the first of all, the most difficult one is political will. You probably have heard this before. In order to start a system that can effectively curb and fight corruption, we need to put in place a series of key agents that can promote change. I always said that we need to aim for a gradual approach to fighting corruption, because of course it will rock a lot of votes and it was very difficult to implement. So the first, it will be technical. We need to provide judiciaries and prosecutions with the technical abilities, knowledge, and infrastructure to conduct the work. We're talking about sometimes judiciaries that are paper-based. We're talking about information that is not encrypted, that can be easily lost or forgotten. So that's a one thing to remember. The other thing to remember is that we need to keep pushing for citizen participation and for journalists. I mean, this kind of advocacy that comes from the third sector, from journalists, from the public, I think it's key, because it reminds us that we need to keep all the corrupt people and people that find corruption at bay. It's essential. And actually, there is a momentum that is a bit lost because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But before that, corruption was ranked as the top priority in the region. Right now, unfortunately, it's crime because of other series of factors. We can talk about them maybe in another episode. But we have to remember that corruption still ranks among the 3 top priorities for citizens in the region.
So to conclude this conversation, Denisse, is there reason to be optimistic about how this kind of transnational corruption is being addressed? Are there signs of hope that we are improving, that the situation in particular, for example, in Latin America is improving?
I would have to say that yes, we have some space for optimism, in the sense that we see a lot of people being brought to justice, which is a good sign. Also, we have to remember that what used to be the rule was impunity, and it's no longer the rule. Now the rule is at least trying to prosecute as many people that have been involved in corruption. So at first it could give the sense that corruption is everywhere, which is true, it's everywhere, but it's something that's being done with. Somebody is chasing it, somebody is revealing what's going on. We have to thank also new technologies in order to uncover a lot of wrongdoing. So I will think that we are towards a good path, but it's not good enough yet.
All right. On that note, we'll conclude this conversation. Denisse, thanks a lot for being with us today for this snapshot on political corruption. For our viewers who are interested in this topic or on other topics, our Policy Leader Fellows work on a range of issues, focusing on policy in different areas, and often with a cross-border dimension. Check out our website, www.ui.eu/stg, to find out more what's going on. Several events we organize. You can also join online from wherever you are in the world. So please go and have a look. And do not forget to subscribe to this channel. Thanks for joining us.